I've been rethinking hard about what you said Monday about, well, the whole question of do we want to reify claims. I still believe it's probably a good idea, but I want to work harder to justify it because you're right that it requires justification. And it's possible. Sorry, reify concepts. Apologies.
I'm not certain I remember the context. Can you fill me in?
That's the conversation we had Tuesday, sorry, not Monday, when we were, I said, oh, let's reify the concept, not just the, not just the statement. And you said, actually, all the information should be in the statement and its relations, which I agree with, but I'm saying it's still probably worth it to reify as opposed to recalculating the statement every time.
Yeah, I think I vaguely remember.
So it's, let's say I'm still thinking hard about that one. And that's one reason.
That's when I'm these meetings thinking.
Yes. And that's why I'm not ready to lead today. I still think I'll end up wanting to reify the concept, but I think I want to really spend time justifying it. Well, we're waiting a bit for, oh, Carl arrived. Hi, Carl.
I have to leave at about 8:25 for a meeting for work.
Okay. So let's jump right in.
I need to switch to a different desktop. So Marc-Antoine suggested that we continue the glossary discussion. I think it's very nice Timothy is here because I think it's it's Timothy and Joshua right now that are the main people that see objections with the current definition. Even though Joshua said he agrees with the current definition, I'm not 100% certain he understands the intent. I wrote a short summary on Hangouts of, oh, I need to switch this back. Yes, I wrote a short summary on Hangouts of what I think where the disagreement might lie. And for me, it all boiled down to the notion of implicit and explicit representations of statements in the shared immutable representation of a bad claim, or rather, a bad claim is a shared immutable representation. So I think what I was hinting at when I introduced the definition as part of the user story of wanting to have this immutable thing I can link to from anywhere that other people can add supporting and opposing arguments to. I think I want them to link to an explicit statement, meaning the third cup example that Joshua gives by that definition does not make an explicit statement. It implies statements. Actually, I don't know which ones. I'm not that keen on art, but let's take the better example we discussed is the whole book of To Kill a Mockingbird. Doesn't make an explicit statement. It might actually somewhere in the book there might be things that can be interpreted as explicit statements. But when Timothy argues, well, this can be a supporting claim, what he means is that, well, what are the examples you gave, Timothy?
Wait, at which level? I was writing something, so I didn't hear your whole sentence.
I'm trying to highlight that for me, what is missing from the current definition of bare claim is the notion that it needs what the user agrees or disagrees with as a whole needs to be explicit. It needs to be explicitly stated in the shared immutable representation. I think that's what is missing from my definition, which is why we don't want
Society Library, for the record, distinguishes implicit claims. So you have the claim and you have implicit claims that can be inferred from the claim. And that, for example, covers dog whistles. And I think it would also cover your example with not the Communist Manifesto, but the other one you named, the anti-racist book.
The more I think about it, yes, the more I agree that the distinction between implicit and explicit claim is more what this is about. And the explicit thing being the shared immutable representation.
Right. I was going to say,
if you agree or disagree with something that's implied by the shared immutable representation, that doesn't fit within my definition of bad claim. I mean, you can do that, but that doesn't make it a bad claim. If you look at the definition, it contains with people can agree or disagree with as a whole. I'm referring to the explicit statements, not the implied. So this teacup might imply things. A book might imply things. But what makes it a bare claim is everything that's explicitly stated within the shared immutable representation. And that's why I'm inclined to add that somehow explicitly, because I think it draws the line clear. This one is still the image here, the flat earth thing. It's still a bit ambiguous, but it at least explicitly makes it more like, well, flat earth is debunked because of this argument.
I have something to say, but I think Tim should go first.
I think it's a good summary. You can go first. I don't have anything to say yet.
Okay. I totally, on the one hand, totally agree with what you're saying, and it makes sense. I do fear that it's, again, not as clear boundary as we would want, because the question of what is implied and what is explicit, like sometimes some people will say, oh, of course, this claim means that. No, you're reading that into it. No, it's clear. It's clearly said there. So there might be corner cases there, but I think it's still valid to say, you know, if you can express it differently, this thing that is clearly said there, let's actually then make the distinction between what you think is implied and what is the more explicit version.
We have the notion of, you know, we know that claims can be ambiguous and can be understood differently by different people. So, like, for me, the line that needs to be drawn clearly is understanding when, it's not understanding what the claim is, but when a claim is being made. If it's clear that a claim is being made, then it should be a bare claim. And I know that's a circular definition. But that to me is probably where we should figure out how to draw the line, as opposed to this thing of did they understand the right claim and all that. You know, I'm not sure how to draw that line clearly, but you know, that to me is the difference between, like, you know, a piece of art and something that was clearly intended to say a specific thing. The other part that is tricky for me is I want it to be something that is saying one thing. It's just saying, it's making one claim. Like, I don't want the Communist Manifesto to be in there. I don't want a full scientific study with hundreds of claims to be considered a bare claim.
But you were one of the people that argued for compound claims to be in there.
That's the problem. That's why I'm saying, again, it's something I want, but I don't know how to draw a clear line there, because exactly. You know, I feel like maybe the clear line, but this will go back to language, is what can be expressed in a single sentence, which is why I go back to a declarative sentence. But that doesn't then include other formats, which is what we're trying to include here.
So I agree with both of what you said. I think it boils down to a missing definition of a statement in a way. Right now, we agree that a declarative sentence is a statement, but we don't agree on other examples. We know that a mathematical proposition we want to include, and that also makes a clear statement you can point to. So what I try to do in my comments to summarize that, for me, this is really the essence. Oh, and I see that Carl wants to go next, so I'll keep it short. But for me, what you having a hard time defining where to draw the line, Timothy. For me, it's if within this definition, when you say you agree or disagree with something, it needs to be something you can explicitly point to, a statement you can explicitly point to within the shared representation. So you cannot do that. You cannot do that with a third teacup, for example. In a compound claim, you can point to A or to B. In an argument, you can point to, and yeah, for me, that's where I draw the line. Carl?
I was just going to say that a compound claim could be a sort of a release valve for this problem. Like we find some way of saying these smaller things are claims, but then the system allows compound claims. I mean, that's sort of because we know that there are things that people want to represent that are more complicated than very short, succinct statements could support. And Stephen, I thought you said in response to Tim that, oh, but you also wanted to support compound claims. And to me, compound claims would be sort of a solution in support of simplifying.
No, I meant that Timothy was arguing that compound claims should be included in this definition. And I agree, by the way, compound claims are bad claims. By this definition, I see no point to not include them.
What does a compound claim mean? Like it includes like a conjunction in the text, or because I don't think we haven't
one here
talked about any sort of structure.
So the example that's.
I think I could propose a definition for compound claim. To me, the definition of compound claim is there's more than one way to defeat the claim. Which is that thing about the one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater. If that's a single concept, that one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater, it's not a compound claim because you just have to prove it wasn't that type of creature. But if you're looking at a concept of something that had one horn, one eye, could fly and all that, you could defeat that claim by showing it had more than one horn. You could defeat it by showing it. In other words, there are multiple angles of attack to defeat that, which means any conjunction of A and B you can defeat by defeating A or defeating B, right?
I respectfully disagree. I think simple claims often have multiple refutations.
And I think it's out of scope for this discussion. We're not defining compound claim. I added it here. It's a relevant discussion to have, but I think to focus on identifying bad claim, I don't think it's relevant.
I would be interested in having that discussion about more than one way. Not now. Let's table that. But I want to come back to that someday because that would be a good conversation.
No, it's an important discussion. We all agree. I'm trying to think about this boundary between the compound claim and the Communist Manifesto, which I understand why you want to exclude it, Tim. I'm less sanguine because for me, bare claim is not an atomic concept in the sense, I agree it's a relevant concept, but for me, the atomic concept is bare phrase or bare statement or bare, which includes entity definition, which includes things that are not claims. And bare claims is a subclass of that, where it happens to also be declarative, right? And in that case, in the case of, so for me, the Communist Manifesto is a perfectly valid compound, meaning unit, I'm calling them statements, or let's call them statements as opposed to concepts. I'm including entities and statements explicitly. And in the case of the Communist Manifesto, what's important, I think, is that there are many claims, and it's hard to get people to agree on what exactly is the set of explicit versus implicit claims. And I think this is where the fundamental difference is with the compound claim. If we're thinking the bare claim, it's explicit and there's an agreement on what the explicit parts are. And it's easy to agree upon. If there's ambiguity about what the explicit parts are, then maybe it's not a good bare claim candidate and it's more in the Communist Manifesto category because you've got all these possible things. I don't know, it's being a bit iffy, but I'm proposing that as a distinguisher.
Yeah, it does seem iffy I don't know if we could draw a line. I know I'm not even a clear line, but a rougher line. I think that, but you know, I have a proposal, but it doesn't really help because then it requires the next definition. But it's along the lines of saying it's making a single statement, which we haven't defined statement, but what it is it's a single concept.
No,
I would almost say it's something, anything that could be translated into a single declarative statement. Perhaps that's the way to put it. If it isn't a declarative sentence, then it's something that could be translated into.
I would go one step further, Timothy, because I agree that is an essential property, but I go one step further in the proposition I wrote in Hangouts, is that one declarative statement should be represented in shared immutable representation. If it's not contained therein, you can always implicitly have explicit declarative statements, but that's where I draw the line. The fur teacup does not make an explicit declarative statement. Only implicitly it can imply things, but then it's not a bare claim if it's only implicit. I had a lengthy discussion with Jonathan on this, so it might also at this point be useful to have his input on this.
Mm.
Sorry for calling you out.
Yeah. I have nothing to contribute right at this moment.
So I think the essence is we're trying to draw a line between when is it explicit enough almost, and when is it too long to be very clear which one is the statement that the bare claim is about. I think those are the 2 points of contention. Like the whole of the Communist Manifesto probably, and I would have to take it with me right now, for me it's just clear that it's arguing for, as a whole, for communism. There's probably a very clear declarative statement in the whole shared representation, being the whole book, that you can point to. That's what I disagree or agree with. If you cannot point to such a thing, and it might actually always need to be a declarative sentence, that's something I'm playing with. Although it could be MOF, like Marc-Antoine has mentioned many times before. If you can point to it, for me, then it isn't a bad claim. The Communist Manifesto you can. In To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yes, that's the one.
Is there the examples that came up, the examples you're using it for is either as evidence, like this happened. Nowhere in To Kill a Mockingbird is it written, this whole thing as a history has happened.
The Communist Manifesto, what does it mean to agree with the Communist Manifesto? Because that's an interesting question to ask. Does this, in my everyday intuition, I'm not claiming this is a formal definition. It means that I'm both agreeing with the overall conclusion and with the soundness of the argument for it. Of course, it's a vague agreement, right? In the sense that I could be disagreeing with certain details, certain specific reasons being given, and I could still say informally that I agree with the book because I agree with enough of the arguments to think that they make a sound reason to agree with communism. So that's
what the as a whole is trying to hint at. Indeed, that's a nice summary.
That's
as a whole is a key word there.
Yeah, but for me, when I was reading as a whole, I would say in my intuition of what we're trying to define, I would ask for agreement with every single detail, maybe. And then if not, you're saying, well, then you're agreeing with parts of the Communist Manifesto. Like if we're going to be more formal about it.
That's a different point, I agree.
It's a different point. I'm saying there's
agree, right? It's not about whether or not the agreement is valid or whatever. It's about they can agree.
Yep. And I guess that's the question. Can you agree with the book as a whole vaguely in my first definition? Certainly. Can you agree with every single detail? It's not easy because it's not clear what is considered a detail because it's a potentially endless list of details and can be pried out of the book. And so this is why I'm arguing if it's hard to have an exhaustive representation, here are the components of the compound, and it's a finite list, and it cannot be added to, then is that a compound claim? Is that a bare claim in that definition? I'm not sure, because we don't know what we're agreeing with as a whole, if we're going to be formal about as a whole.
Again, that's not part of, we explicitly exclude that part, that you don't know what you're agreeing with. But I agree with the overall thing, the overall bad claim you just said. Ko?
I apologize if someone brought this up or I missed it, or I wasn't able to catch up on the whole Slack conversation. But have we approached this? Do we try to approach this from a linguistic approach, where we say something like a bare claim must include a single independent clause? I know that may sound like cheeky to try and like find some linguistic definitional way to get out of it, but like I don't know, maybe that I think as I look at examples, that's how I think I try to, in my head, I'm like, okay, it's a claim if I see a single independent clause, and if I see people tacking on things with conjunctions, that to me is too complicated. Even if there may be like sub ideas contained inside the independent clause, I'm like, well, but at least the person tried. If we have to parse it apart somehow, using some sort of tooling, fine. But
no, well, I think we wanted to include compound claims explicitly. Now, maybe we may decide to define atomic bare claim, and then
I think I was saying something different before we continue. It must include a single doesn't mean that it can only include a single. These are two different statements. But
is it? Not sure about
must
that.
include
so no, I would say both, but they're two separate conversations. Like, so yeah, like white supremacy exclamation point would fail because it doesn't seem to include even one single linguistic independent clause. But I personally am also arguing against like multiple independent clauses in there, because just what's the benefit? Like you're allowing now you have to include To Kill a Mockingbird potentially, unless you find some way to exclude To Kill a Mockingbird, the full text.
Okay.
So
why?
I have a thought there with the linguistic trick. I was thinking the same thing, designing some prototypes, that the system would have an input box for entering a claim. And that input box would have above it a drop down that says, where you can select, I agree that, or I disagree that, or it's true that, or it's not true that. One of those, but you had to prepend your text with that. And a claim that naturally, that made a comprehensible sentence, that was a clause that could be affixed to one of those prefixes, would be a claim. And the thing is that works pretty well. It doesn't cover representations that are not plain English. But you could say, I agree that the world is round. I agree that the 1 + 1 = 5, that we should not avoid conflict with China. I agree that A and B and C. I agree that communism is good because of A, B, and C.
It sidesteps the discussion. I think we can all agree on that, but then we can no longer have the discussion about whether or not you want to add some images as bad claims in a system.
Well,
and that's what we're doing. We're not discussing right now whether we only want to have textual bad claims in a
So
system.
that's not what I'm suggesting, that we only want to have textual bare claims. But I'm thinking that's potentially a good mental test, because what if your UI allowed you to paste in something other than text? So I agree that, and then a picture of a fur teacup. Well, it doesn't make any sense, right? But I agree that, and then an image of the Holocaust. This happened. Well, that totally makes sense.
I agree that some category diagram makes sense. By the way, just Carl, I want to, one quick point before Tim goes. I think compounds are essential. In reasoning, often, for example, you have a dilemma. You're saying either this or that. That's a compound. And you agree that either one of those is true as a step in a dilemma. I think you cannot think without compounds.
Can you do it? So is that the only one maybe that can be allowed? Is disjunctions like that, the or?
No, that's the first one that comes to mind. But if you want, I can find others. I think compounds are essential to thought.
Well, we're just trying to define a term, and not decide what is allowed in any particular system. And
Right.
so I think that's why we might want to talk about, I think, atomic claims, define those later. I think most of us agree that this definition, there's a desire for a definition that is more broad, even if many of our systems are not going to allow any sort of bare claim. I think realistically, a lot of people will create systems where the claim has to be more atomic, it has to be text, it has to be, can't be too ambiguous, and has a, we're going to add a lot more constraints to this very, very broad inclusive definition.
And of course, atomic bare claim is a useful concept, and we'll get there. But
we need to pinpoint it though, and I think we are converging somewhat more on a better definition. I personally really liked the example of white supremacy. We only hinted at it. Does everyone right now agree that white supremacy is not a better claim? Because I find it interesting, because for me, it's the equivalent of a fur teacup.
Right.
To me, it's the same as a fur teacup. Like I strongly disagree with fur teacups, as almost as much as I disagree with white supremacy, but I would not call those claims.
Neither.
But by the way, what teacup? I never got it.
Wait.
I disagree with
I
that.
have a couple thought exercises to throw in here. One is the one I already kind of proposed is as a thought exercise is whatever thing it is, could it be translated to a single declarative sentence, right? Is it possible to translate it?
But that doesn't work. I explained why, because implicitly, yes, that's always possible. That doesn't solve anything.
Okay, well, sort of. But
What?
the second part is there are different types of claims, right? There's the deontic, there's the historical, there's predictive, there's different types of claims that can be made here, right? And I think one of the problems with something as broad as a Communist Manifesto or a photo is you don't even know which kind of claim is being made here. I'm not saying this is part of the definition, but it's something we should think through perhaps. As a Communist Manifesto, is it saying we should adopt communism? Is it saying that this analysis of the power structure is correct? Is it, that's one of the reasons I wouldn't be able, when you ask, the heuristic here is when you ask somebody to translate it into a declarative sentence, what kind of claim do you think they're going to come out with? And I have a problem when it's not that they don't understand the meaning of a word, that's ambiguity, but they don't even understand what kind of claim should be pulled out if there's only one claim, right? The second thought exercise is essentially, compound claims are okay, but something like the Communist Manifesto, as we stated, is essentially a compound claim, but we don't know even how many components are in that compound claim that you're agreeing to. It's not like A and B or A and B and C. You don't know how many elements. Yeah, right.
That's why for me, the distinction is not how many components, but it's the fact that you can point to any component when you say you agree or disagree. It's the pointing act that is important here. And what you're pointing to should be, and I'm willing to go as far as to say it should be a declarative sentence, except that that doesn't include the so for me, why I added statement on the needs to be defined is I think we need a broader concept than declarative sentence that also incorporates math propositions.
What propositions?
Mathematical propositions.
Oh.
A mathematical proposition is not a declarative sentence, but what we're trying to capture here is if it's either a mathematical proposition or a declarative sentence, but not a fur teacup image.
Sorry, how is the fur teacup a claim? It's a art piece. I'm not familiar with it.
The whole argument is that it implies claims, and yeah, the specific claims it implies, I personally don't know either.
Okay, good. It's an art piece and it implies claims. Fair enough. Other than its own existence. Cool.
No, Jonathan has the details because he disagrees with it. I don't know what Jonathan means when he says he disagrees with the fur teacup, but I'm certain it's an implied claim.
Well, the reason I say that is we've talked in our definition. It's something that people may agree or disagree with. And for the same reason people disagree with white supremacy. I think colloquial, someone might look at a fur teacup and say, "Oh, I don't agree with that." You know, it's a little
Exactly,
bit.
but it's a different act of agreeing, and that's why I think we're missing a concept to point to the collection of either a declarative sentence or a mathematical proposition.
When
It's
Jonathan says he disagrees with it, you mean you have a reaction to it? Like you have a reaction, an adverse reaction to seeing a fur teacup, right?
And people would describe that reaction as disagreement, just like white supremacy. It's a noun, but people disagree with it, but it's not a claim.
but
We need
that's
to be clear what we mean by agree or disagree.
but it's true that the question of implicit explicit does fall into the notion of interpretation. Like you were saying, white supremacy exclamation mark is not a claim. Well, for me, it's pretty obviously the claim that
I'm saying it's not a declarative sentence, essentially.
Yeah, it's a message that's trying to imply a claim, and you could then articulate in a declarative sentence what claim that it's trying to imply.
But that's implicit.
And
Yeah,
and that's that goes to that exercise of that one could turn into at least two different kinds of claims, which is white people are supreme, like there exists white supremacy, or it's we should promote white supremacy.
Which is why my definition is that there's no turning into. It needs to be inside the shared representation. If you need to turn it into something that's not present in the shared representation, it's not a bare claim.
right. So,
but that's a rephrasing. And what I'm saying is there's claims that are clearly claims and that need rephrasing to be intelligible. How is that different from something that is not clearly a claim but needs rephrasing to be intelligible?
We can add it to the list.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think the Vogelbauer is much blacher actually is quite appropriate as an example of something that needs rephrasing to be intelligible, assuming that there is an intelligible version.
So the assumption here is that to someone, Vogelbauer is a known thing. Let's assume a gaming community where Vogelbauer is a person and smudge blocker is a property that anyone in that video game can have. It's intelligible to that community.
Exactly.
That's why it matches the definition.
Yeah. I'm thinking, let's say, I'm looking at the sentences there.
The point here
my Ajax is magnanimous is another example. Like it's not intelligible without agreeing on the definition of magnanimous.
But you're
I need to paraphrase
again to something we already excluded in the definition.
Yes, I know.
Intelligibility. You're including again. Leave it out.
But what I'm saying is that something is clearly, in this case, something is clearly a claim, but is only intelligible with rephrasing. And we agreed that it's still a claim without that. But I'm saying white supremacy is only intelligible with rephrasing. I'm not sure how it is fundamentally different. For me, it's clearly a claim. We're not sure which claim without rephrasing.
The difference is what I said. This blocker is smudge blocker remains. You might add to it. You might add to the representation to make it more clear.
Yeah.
White supremacy.
Or Paris is nice, right? Let's have our usual Paris is nice.
No, but in that case, you may not understand the words that are being said, but you understand the structure of the claim.
Yeah.
Right.
What I'm saying is white supremacy exclamation mark is clearly a claim, no less than Paris is nice. I'm not sure which claim it is, and that requires rephrasing to know which claim is being made.
When you say claim, what do you mean?
I'm not sure which kind of claim it is.
Exactly.
That's correct.
Is that because it lacks a predicate? I mean, the Vogelbauer is smudge blocker has the is, so it's clear. Like we don't know what smudge blocker means, but is smudge blocker okay? We understand that Vogelbauer is the agent and is smudge blocker is the predicate linguistically, whereas white supremacy doesn't even have a predicate. So like there's some nominative white supremacy.
the exclamation mark, the exclamation mark is kind of a predicate. It's saying this is good, or as I assert it in front of controversy, or, and you're right, there's
I mean,
multiple
it could be,
possible
but it could be an
interpretations.
exclamation
But I'm
against it. It could be say, wait, is that white supremacy? I hate white supremacy. White supremacy's there, everyone. You know, it could be that.
It's ambiguous, but it's still unambiguously a claim because there's an exclamation mark. It's not just naming an entity.
I think at some point we need to draw a
statement.
line. Some point we need to draw a line.
Yeah, but
that's the
I'm saying,
line we're drawing. That's what we're trying to define. Just calling everything a claim and moving back is not helping us.
How would
The
you?
difference here is exactly one in one language. It's not a declarative sentence. That much. So if we would say that we only allow declarative sentences, we rule out a lot of other bad claims we do want to include. This is a concession to what is it called, a concession? This is something I agree with you. We want to be broader than only declarative sentences.
Is there an academic definition or categorization of types of claim?
There is, yeah. It's the normative, descriptive.
There's many, but yeah, that's a good one. I agree.
Because if we could just say, yeah, it has to be clear what type of claim is being made. That gets rid of at least a large swath of.
Well, I see white supremacy exclamation mark is clearly a deontic claim.
So, and Marc-Antoine, I do think the correct term is descriptive. Deontic logic is a way of formalizing in a formal logic these normative claims.
It's a normative claim. Yeah, it's deontic. It's a normative claim.
Yeah,
the one with the version with
it's not deontic unless you're using the formal a formal deontic logic.
I won't argue that. I disagree, but
anyway. Can I point something out, because I don't think what I said before landed, and for me this is a key distinction. So let me try again. The difference between white supremacy and vlogblokker is much blocker. If consider both, we're talking about these two examples being a bad claim or not. The difference is when vlogblokker is much blocker is a bad claim, the thing you disagree or agree with that you point to is the same. It doesn't change with the additional context. The context you add just allows you to better interpret whether or not you agree with this representation. In the case of white supremacy, the thing you agree or disagree with is not that thing you're pointing to. You can the thing you're going to agree or disagree with is the context you add. Like let's support white supremacy.
Or this is white supremacy. I hate it.
Yeah. Add some implied stuff. So you're going to say, I don't like doing this because it's a controversial topic, but give me one. What could you mean by saying white supremacy exclamation mark?
No, I mean, Carl gave a great example, right? You're denouncing something by saying this is white supremacy.
White supremacists should all die. Okay, let's say something like that. Now, when you're saying you agree or disagree with it, you're not pointing to this, you're pointing to that thing, which is not part of the shared immutable representation. That's a key difference. You're pointing to the implicit part. Whereas with what I call a bad claim, when you agree or disagree, you point to something which is part of the shared immutable representation. Being vlogblokker is much blocker, that doesn't change. That for me is a key distinction.
I'm not fully convinced because the whole vlogblokker is much blocker. Anything can change with different definitions. So I don't, what I'm pointing
the definition is not included in the shared.
No, exactly. But what I'm saying is everything is variable. But I kind of see what you're saying. The whole this is terrible because it's white supremacy versus white supremacy rules are both valid interpretations. And in this case, it may be carrying too much context to be treated as a claim.
Well, the point is there is no context. It's stripped of context. It's bare. The only
I know. But
the shared context is the bare.
The point is do you know? Like we agreed that we can agree on its claim nature without knowing even what the claim means, as in the vlogblokker example.
I think so. Yes.
Yes.
That's what I hope, because that's what I hope to make the difference.
There's a difference between ambiguity and a implicit versus explicit.
Absolutely, that's what we're trying to
In the example
tease
of,
out.
so Paris is nice, is very explicit but ambiguous.
Correct.
And so is the Vector example potentially. I mean, it's not necessarily ambiguous. You just don't happen to know what it means, right? Whereas
Could be ambiguous.
could be, but white supremacy exclamation point is clearly not. It's you can only implicitly infer a claim from it.
Why
Yeah,
is that? Is it because it lacks a predicate?
I don't think it's so.
It's because it's not a declarative. It is not a representation, either in image or formula or plain English, of a declarative sentence. I think what we might come down to is a representation that's immutable of a declarative sentence, but allowing different types of representations other than just Unicode.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I would call that thing statement, and it would be nice to have more concrete examples of other things than declarative sentences, like mathematical formulas and like the other things that we might want to include potentially. And then we can just defer this definition to statements.
What?
Because we essentially want to say white supremacy is not a statement.
It's what bothers
Which is
me.
Weird, right? Linguistically, so we need to find a nice word for it. But
what bothers me is it's unmistakably a claim. Now, I agree that we don't know which claim it is, and it requires context to know even which.
When you say things like it's unmistakably not a claim, it really doesn't help anyone. It's circular. We're trying to define what makes it or doesn't make it.
Yeah.
No. When I said it's unmistakably a claim, not a claim. Okay, in my intuition of the notion of claim is it's claiming, it's not just trying to neutrally say this is the definition of that thing. It's this thing is good, this thing is bad, this thing is, now we don't know which, but
it's to make a claim. Someone is trying to communicate a claim, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it matches our definition of bare claim that we're trying to come up with.
That is of course possibly
The claims
true.
that it's trying to communicate could be represented as bare claims.
Oh, of course. But I mean, what I'm saying is anything can be rephrased. And the question is, when is a rephrasing not an implicit claim?
When is the rephrasing not an implicit claim?
Yeah, what I'm saying is,
what I'm hinting at is that no rephrasing is allowed. It's not a bare claim if you need to rephrase it, then it becomes implicit.
No, I agree. What I'm saying is many of the claims are unintelligible. Well, they're ambiguous, and that's
a different discussion.
It's a different discussion.
Yeah. So I see what you're saying, where in a system, including system I imagine making, someone might post white supremacy exclamation point, and someone might say, I disagree. And that's okay, even though it's not formalized and clear what claim they're actually disagreeing with, right? So that's really interesting. You've got these things.
No, it's okay. Yeah, but I agree. We may leave it out of their claim without damage.
I would call it a different use case. For the purpose of our glossary, it's perfectly fine to talk about that use case, but I don't want to call white supremacy a bad claim. I would call it something else.
Exactly. That's what I was saying, right? So there's a broader definition here, and I'm acknowledging the existence of that definition, even if we haven't found a word.
Okay. I'm tabling my objection. I'm blocking, and it's too much of an edge case. It's not that important. I was trying to.
It's a valid use case, but I think we will get there as part of other use cases.
Fair.
Yeah.
I would call it a response by a person.
Let's put it in the does not match definition. Actually,
I agree. So, but let's give this now that we've talked about this. Let's see whether white supremacy is there anyone that thinks that it matches the definition. So that's progress. So we can add it as a new does not match. A picture of a fur teacup. Does anyone believe it matches the definition? This is a bit more tricky. And I should ideally find a picture and add it. And then the really tricky ones are these.
Yes.
Oh no, let's actually look first at the ones that do match. This picture. This is also a tricky one. Is there anyone that thinks that it doesn't match the definition?
I think it does match.
I think so too. It's a border case, but I'm also inclined to say it matches. Because it's an argument simply depicted in an image, but an argument as a whole, it's fairly explicit and you can agree or disagree with it.
It's multi-part, it's a compound, but the compound can be exhaustively identified.
I agree. Anyone?
Let me ask you a question. What do we think about the phrase, has anyone ever seen the sun in the dead of night? Thought not, lol, flat earth debunked. Is that sentence a bare claim?
I think it is.
Yes, I agree.
But it's true, the point, a point I think you're trying to make, which is perfectly valid, is it's, you know, it's a conclusion, it's a reasoning towards a conclusion, and the premise, we have to transform a question into an implicit claim. There's a rephrasing needed. So that's really interesting. As a whole, I still think it's a claim, but the parts don't fit the definition because they have to be rephrased as claims. That's a very, we need
Sounds
to.
a bit like a contradiction. So the reason I would say it does match, and thank you for bringing that up, Timothy, it's a very good thought exercise.
Yes, yes.
For me, it does match because I can easily point to flat earth debunked here, which is almost a not really grammatically declarative sentence. Is it? Maybe it is even.
It is.
But for me, within the shared representation,
There's no verb, but okay.
I can point
Debunk
to
is a verb.
The fact these are like
well, okay, it's incorrect grammar because it's
yes. It's not a grammatical sentence, but it's a full sentence. There's a verb.
but it's legible enough to English-speaking people. Flat earth debunked could be considered an ingrammatical declarative sentence that I can point to within a shared immutable representation. That is the thing that you can agree or disagree with. Everything that precedes it is part of the argument. That for me is why it matches the definition.
So another similar definition would be communism is good because X. So
arguments are claims.
Right, where you include your reasoning for your conclusion as part of the claim.
Yeah.
Mathematically, you know, that would be, you know, A, therefore A implies B, right? If you were to represent it.
A and A implies B, therefore B, if we want to be explicit about the modus ponens, yes.
Right. And that's different from just saying A, right?
Yes.
Mathematically, that has very different.
Yes, that's why as a whole, right. Yeah, exactly. Including the reasoning. Right. You agree, so including the reasoning.
Here, the reasoning is, you know, has anyone seen the sun in the dead of night? Reasoning itself is not a claim, which is interesting. But
it is.
Well, we don't have a definition of claim here, so
yeah, but
it's not a bare claim. The reasoning itself is not a bare claim. Now we can use that terminology.
Oh, I disagree. Okay, I disagree. We'll get into that, but I think I'll go.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, no. The premise is not a bare claim. I agree with that.
Okay.
But I'm saying the reasoning is a bare claim.
Yeah, but then that's why we need examples, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting indeed. When we have A implies B and A therefore B, and when I say agreeing as a whole, there's agreeing with A, agreeing with B, and agreeing with the soundness of A implies B. And these are three distinct components. And I include all three in the agreeing as a whole.
Let's get this one out of the way. Is there anyone that thinks that communism is good because it distributes wealth is not a bare claim? I think we agree on this one, right?
It is a bare claim.
Yes. Okay, then maybe Carl, because you've raised your hand for quite some time.
Well, so I don't know the right timing to bring this up. Probably the right timing would have been earlier, but there's this definition of proposition from this glossary that I found useful. And I know that we're starting to sort of start to come together on a definition, but I would be interested at least in hearing people's critiques of this definition, because I'm not quite ready to give up on like a sort of linguistic inspired, and it may not be for bare claim. Like, I don't know where this proposition thing might fit, but I'm very interested in finding a term definition that corresponds with what I think this page definition is sort of pointing to. So, I mean, if you want to say this is something else, you know, a baked potato claim, that's fine. But
what they're saying is it's the part that's invariant. So under rephrasing. So each of the rephrasing fits my definition of a bare claim. The proposition is kind of the equivalence class of all those bare claims that have the same proposition being circular again. But I think it's a valid, useful concept, but it's a different one.
And I think what we're trying to find is, how do you represent propositions? Like which things are valid representations of propositions? You know, so this phrasing is fine, this phrasing's fine, perhaps this picture is fine because we can identify the proposition here.
Yep. Correct.
I think proposition might be what I was referring to as statements. That is missing. And I'm willing to do this, and then we indeed could pick it up. Because I think it would indeed make it easier to.
For me, the proposition is a concept and not a linguistic object. It's language, and it's independent of it.
By the very thing of it being a word, it's a linguistic concept, no? And
what I'm saying is, it may be a linguistic concept. I'm saying it doesn't correspond to natural language entities. It does not correspond to strings of words. It is represented by a string of words, or many of them, but it's precisely what is common to these many representations, and as such, it's a concept. It's not the strings themselves.
So you don't think? Okay, I got you. So you don't think it's useful to use in the definition of bare claim, because then, yeah.
Okay.
Understood.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, it could still be useful later to talk
yes,
about.
It's a useful concept. It'll come.
Yeah.
But
would it be correct to say that, given our definition of bare claim, a bare claim is a representation of a proposition?
I think so.
I think so too.
So in that sense, it might be useful indeed to. I added it to the backlog. I think it's good to talk about at some point. But for now, we were looking at this one. Has anyone ever seen the sun in the dead of night? Thought not all flat Earth debunked. Is there anyone that thinks that this does not match the definition?
So I have my doubts. I think flat Earth debunked does, but I don't think I have a strong argument. The rest of it almost makes, because you can tack on a whole bunch of other stuff that eventually, like, you have an image with a picture of a rainbow and a flower and a bunch of other stuff, and then you have the text, some claim. At some point, yeah, you can kind of consider that that a whole image a claim, because a declarative sentence often has even verbal decoration, additional stuff that verbs and whatnot you use to embellish the declarative sentence. And so maybe this, this kind of rhetorical question, can be tacked on to a clear declarative sentence, just the way that adjectives and.
I think it's interesting you bring this up, because it is a valid line. It might be nitpicky, because in this case, we're really talking about grammar, right? The grammar of flat Earth debunked. If it would say flat Earth is debunked, would you then still think it?
So
I have doubts?
My doubts are not about the grammar. So flat Earth debunked by itself, totally claim, because I'm bare claim, because I'm perfectly happy with being permissive with language.
Okay.
I think we, but it's this other stuff, which is a question that
it's a rhetorical question. Yeah.
It's a rhetorical question, and my mind hasn't quite.
Okay.
How you have rhetorical questions supporting a statement, whether you can wrap those together and consider them to be kind of one declarative.
It's really interesting because on the one hand, I think we should analyze the communism is good because it distributes wealth a bit in more detail before we tackle this one, but that's may or may not be important, because what do we mean by as a whole? For me, as a whole means agree with the premise, agree with the conclusion, agree with the link. And here, with the has anyone here, I agree with the premise, I agree with the conclusion, agree with the link, but the premise as stated is not a bare claim. I think that's clear. The rhetorical question is, if it were taken out, it would not qualify as a bare claim, because we don't know whether it's a question or a rhetorical question. It's the context of the whole sentence that makes it clear that it's a rhetorical question and that you can infer a claim from it, right? Nobody has ever seen the sun in the dead of the night is the inferred claim. Now, because the sentence contains the whole argument, the inference is unambiguous.
Yeah, and let me give another example that come to mind when you said that. I would be okay with the Earth is round because has anyone ever seen the sun in the dead of night? That's odd grammar. You've tacked a question on after because, and yet it's totally intelligible. I think
it's the same. It's equivalent for me.
I would say it's also equivalent. You just need to be very permissive of grammar, so I guess I can be comfortable with both of those being their claims, representations of clear propositions.
I'm vaguely uncomfortable because it is interpretable as a bare claim. It is a bare claim because the interpretation is ambiguous, or arguably unambiguous. But the notion of allowing so-called unambiguous interpretations,
So I agree both of these match the definition, not because of anything you said, but because what I said before. This contains flat Earth is debunked, and the latter contains the Earth is round. That's my primary reason why both of these match the definition. Anything else is context. That's why I added this example. When you have a picture of a Holocaust, like some mass graves or whatever, and you're captioning this happened, the only reason that picture for me is a bad claim is the caption this happened. If you only have a picture of the Holocaust, for me, it's not a bad claim.
I agree with that, but I have a question for you then. Mm-hmm. If there's A because B, and you agree with A, but you disagree that B is a valid reason to believe A.
Yeah, you disagree with the claim.
We disagree with the claim, right? And of course, it's a valid bare claim. That's not the question, but we disagree with the claim. So now, when you say the only reason you agree with the Earth is round because blah blah blah, you're saying, oh, for me that's a bare claim because the conclusion is a bare claim. You're disregarding the premise. I'm uncomfortable with that. If I'll go a bit further, if it were not even a rhetorical claim, the Earth is round because blue. Is that a bare claim?
I would say yes. Now, I think I can from how Stephen defined it. You need that declarative sentence. You need that proposition, and then you are using the term context, Stephen. Or I would say just any sort of evidence, whether it be a picture, a rhetorical question, any words that
context,
you use.
I should have stated shared immutable representation actually, because that's what it is.
No, but what I'm saying is when I'm saying the Earth is round because blue is not even evidence. That's what I'm saying. It's not even a claim.
People are presenting it as evidence.
Exactly.
I don't know what exactly you would mean there, but people sometimes, because science, right? People sometimes use.
Oh, that's different.
Well, but that's the interpretation part.
Yeah,
it is.
And it's a great example again, by the way. It's round because blue. It's a great example. For me, again,
because
the
if
main
we,
reason I would call it a bad claim, I wouldn't allow it on a platform. But the main reason I call it a bad claim is because the Earth is round is there.
and what I'm saying is, if we allow the Earth is round because blue has a bare claim, we have to accept blue as a bare claim, which I don't want to do.
I don't see why that necessarily follows.
Yeah, that's
why it's problematic.
That's an argument I'm making. I'm saying for the claim to be a valid bare claim, it has to have at least one valid interpretation as.
That's so. Then we have to toss out so many of these.
No, we don't.
Again,
You're thinking of a specific use case where you're going to actually start to formalize these claims and formalize this as an argument, A therefore B, B, and I don't think, and that's an important use case, but I don't think that has to be the exclusive use case. I think not everyone is going to need, we're not always going to have to formalize.
That's fair.
That way. So I can see a system that says the Earth is round because blue, and then somebody says, I don't agree with that because blue is doesn't even make any sense, right? And
there's no claim there, yeah.
Yeah, and you can start
the premise is not a claim.
Whether that premise has any meaning at all, it doesn't have to start out well structured.
But we've said many times things can be rephrased into something that makes sense, but that doesn't mean that they are a bare claim before rephrasing.
That's true. But
and I agree. Of course, we can rephrase the around
of composition here, right? Like if part of the phrase is not a bare claim, that means the whole thing is not a bare claim. I don't think we need to assume that. I think I'm comfortable with. I brought up this example because I was uncomfortable with the rhetorical question being part of the bare claim, but now I've convinced myself the context / evidence in the sporting graphics, whatever, could be whatever.
I have a hard stop. I got to go, but I actually have to say I'm agreeing with Michael Antoine here, which is I think for something to be a bare claim, it needs to be at least translatable into a bare claim.
By whom?
And
that's the thing. You can't always.
Yeah, I know. It's in the eye of the observer, of course. But it would have to be. I mean, I would want to say it should be translatable by anyone into the same statement, which holds for for the flat Earth example. Like you could all agree that if I say the fact that you don't ever see that no one's ever seen the sun at night proves that the Earth is round. You would agree that that is maintaining the spirit of the other sentence, right? But how do you translate blue proves that, what is it? What is the example? I can't
the Earth is
remember.
round. Blue proves the Earth is round.
Blue proves that the Earth is round. How do you, I mean.
We translate it the same way.
We have an example here. Look, block is much block. It's the exact same thing. I don't see why you make a distinction.
No, but there's not a single word that proves.
No. It's not the same thing. I'm sorry.
I have to get going.
If you go there, yeah, okay. If you go there, then blue is a bare claim. It's simple.
No, because blue doesn't contain verb is.
So
well, blue and that's why blue is not a bare claim, and that's why the Earth is round, because blue is not a bare claim.
So therefore, Marc Antoine, you're saying the Earth is round because science is not a bare claim.
Exactly.
I'm saying it's well, I'm saying that's more ambiguous. I'm still unsure.
Okay.
No. 1 second. But because science, it's a very good example. And this is why I said in the case of the Earth is round, because has anyone ever seen the sun dead of night? Here, there is a very unambiguous interpretation, and it's inferred, but there is a unique, well, not unique, but
do you realize you're drawing the line for everyone decisively? The point is we cannot if you cannot draw that line clearly, whenever there's
Yeah.
there might be discussion. What we're suggesting is we still call it a bad claim, and we can later discuss whether or not some bad claims are allowed and others aren't, whether the community decides whether they're allowed or not. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're not trying to draw that line right now. The line we're trying to draw has more to do with the nature of the sentence.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I would refuse both, frankly, because there's too much interpretation. But for that reason, I would refuse both.
But then you would also have to refuse the picture of the Holocaust with "this happened."
Or the block blocker is much blocker as well.
No, 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 no.
Okay, try to explain me why you don't refuse block blocker is much blocker, but you do refuse the Earth is smush blocker.
I am not refusing the Earth is smush blocker. I'm refusing the Earth is round because smush blocker is not clearly a claim. Now, in the case of science, I would end up possibly refusing it, though I would argue it has a clear interpretation as their claim, which is the Earth is round because science says so.
Okay. Yeah, it actually boils down to grammar again.
Yeah, I think the Earth is round because Schmucker has a clear interpretation. You just don't know what it is because you don't know what the word Schmucker means.
That's totally correct.
Even the Earth is round because science is not grammatical. I think it is boiling down to grammar more and more.
No, it's not about grammar. I mean, well, it is grammar in the same way that refusing blue is grammar because there's no preposition. Yeah, that's grammar. It's grammar in exactly the same sense. You're refusing blue as a bare claim because it has no verb. That's grammar.
Do we agree blue is not a bad claim?
Yes, okay. I agree, but I'm saying your reason for refusing it is no more or less grammar than my reason for refusing the Earth is round because blue.
Yeah, I think I get that. I'm even open to making, I don't know how to write it in the definition. Because so for me the key distinction is you need to be able to point to a declarative sentence. The fact that this is there is for me almost sufficient. Okay,
and this is really interesting. There's one last detail I'd like to get into, and maybe we should call it a day, but even is at some point you said if it contains something that is not a claim, and the notion of containment is a bit. I agree that not everything in the bare claim has to be a claim. Like if I say,
yeah, like the pixels in the image is a nice example.
Yeah, or if I say, good morning, it's a beautiful day. Good morning is not a claim. We agreed. It's a beautiful day, I think, is a claim. So good morning, it's a beautiful day is a compound with a non-claim component, and you still agree with it or disagree with it as a whole.
Once you allow this ancillary information that is itself not a claim, then you have to include basically all the last 6 or so if on that list.
No, and I still think not. Here's okay. Let me try to formalize why. If I say Earth is round because blue, then I think that's a great example. I'm saying okay. Let's first take the one that does work. The communist. What is it?
No. So
no. First,
So what are we talking about? We're talking about cases where
A because B. A because B.
Yeah, okay, because the supporting information is not a claim. But there's also the picture of the Holocaust happened in.
Yeah, which I'm fine with. It's just a way to do indexicality. That's fine. It happened. That's a claim. Unambiguous. It's just that the this is indexed to the image. That's fine. My thing is when I'm saying that it's a as a whole. If I say A because B, I'm agreeing with A, B, and A because B. I'm agreeing with 3 things. That's the as a whole. What it means for me to agree with as a whole.
You have to.
If I say
it's yeah. Okay. Yep.
And if A because B and B is not a claim, then B is not something I can agree with, then I cannot agree with it as a whole. And that's why I cannot agree with the Earth is round because blue as a whole, because blue is not something I can agree with.
But you cannot agree with this square representation, this image here. You can't agree or disagree with that. Yet it's part of the representation.
So
That's correct, but it's not, I'm saying it's not part of the as a whole, does mean with every claim part. And the because is part of the claim part. The A because B is part of the claim part. It's not extraneous, it's a claim. And it happens to be a claim
What is
whose
a
one of the
claim part?
components
Because
is,
what is a claim part? We're only talking about shared, like
Okay,
try
okay.
to prevent using cyclical definitions. So that's
And
only a
market
shared
one,
immutable representation.
you don't have to actually dissect the claim. I think you can agree with the claim as a whole, even if you don't specifically agree with the premise or disagree with the premise, or even acknowledge that the premise is even a clearly stated premise. You can still agree or disagree with the claim as a whole.
no, I
In
disagree.
fact,
with
that can be very much the reason that you disagree with the claim as a whole. It's because you don't think it's actually making a logical argument.
I even more disagree with that.
No, as you say, look, they take an example. The Earth is round because, and then some image. I don't know. So you maybe they're trying to imply something with that image, but you can't necessarily agree or disagree with the image. But you still can disagree that the Earth is round because with the overall statement.
I'm still agreeing or disagreeing that the image is a valid premise or valid support for the statement the Earth is round, for the conclusion.
You might
And-
disagree with that image is valid support and that it even is a statement, and that's why you disagree with the overall sentence.
Okay, and your point is I can disagree with Earth is round because blue, because it's not a valid premise. It means I disagree with the overall statement. I'm buying that. Okay, so that's it. You convinced me.
Can you paraphrase them again? Because
Yes. Okay. I was saying I don't agree with that. Okay. I was saying it's not a claim because one of the components is not a claim, but actually, one of the claims is the inference. And in the case of the Earth is round because blue, I'm saying that's not a valid inference. So I'm disagreeing with the inference.
Yep.
And that's good enough.
Because the inference doesn't have even a good logical structure, right?
Yeah, so I'm disagreeing that the inference is sound. I'm disagreeing that this is a sound argument. And I've always said agreeing with the argument as a whole means agreeing also that the inference is sound. For me, the soundness is part of the agreement. And that means disagreeing with the soundness is disagreeing with the sentence as a whole. And so I can disagree with the sentence as a whole without agreeing or disagreeing with the premise.
Yes.
Okay, I buy that argument. Thank you,
Meaning
Jonathan.
that these all match the definition?
No, it doesn't mean that they all match it. Oh, sorry, that all these examples match the definition. Yes,
Okay.
not the components. The premise doesn't match the
We're
definition.
not talking about components.
Yeah, okay, good. Yes, yes,
I
they all match
realized
the
Joshua left, but I'm still gonna try to add them. And I still wanna rework the definition based on this meeting, but let's try. So that means, good morning, it's a beautiful day. Matches or doesn't match?
For me, it matches.
Yeah.
The Earth is round because science. Matches or doesn't match?
Yep.
Match.
The Earth is round because blue. Matches or doesn't match?
Match.
Yep.
This one as well. The Earth is
Yes.
round because
Yep.
a picture of the Holocaust captioned "This happened." Matches or not?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this one that's all started. Matches as well, right?
Match.
Yep.
Okay, and then the books, I think,
Those-
maybe for another time.
Yes, those I'm not sure yet.
But this is progress. Mike and
It
Tuan,
is.
I would greatly appreciate what you just summarized quite eloquently. If you can write that down, so we have it
Absolutely.
for reference in the comments here.
I'll do that.
And then yeah, these two we really shouldn't start today. Okay, cool. This is
Excellent.
great progress.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
All right.
All.
Thanks,
See you
guys.
next
Yeah.
time.
All right. Talk to you all
Good
next.
night.
Bye.